He thought Christmas would be her breaking point. Instead, it became the moment she broke him, because when she stepped into that gala, head high, gown fitted like it was made of armor, on the arm of the most powerful man in the city, every eye turned, including his, and Maddox Rhett, the billionaire tech CEO who once silenced her with paperwork instead of conversation, forgot how to breathe. The room stopped. She didn't. This is the story of the divorce he planned, and the woman who showed up with her power intact. Welcome back to Mr. Charles Stories, the home of love, loss, and lessons that stick with you long after the screen fades. If you've ever been underestimated, walked away from quietly, or had someone believe they'd break you without a word, then this story is for you. Stick with us to the end, because when the heart finds its voice, even silence can echo louder than money. The light over Atlanta was soft that morning, grey, diffused, pressing in like the sky hadn't yet made up its mind. But inside the penthouse, things were crystal clear. Araya stood barefoot in the master suite, silent, steady, staring down at the thick white envelope on the dresser. There was no handwritten note, no explanation, not even a name on the outside. But she didn't need one. She recognized her husband's lawyer's seal, recognized the style of presentation, recognized the pattern. He didn't like conflict. Maddox Rhett solved things with efficiency. Divorce, like everything else, would be handled through his assistant and a file folder. The heat was on, but the room felt cold. Their floor-to-ceiling windows stretched toward the city skyline, the glass clean enough to see everything but feel nothing. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had lived here for years, slept in this bed, folded towels that matched the marble, hosted charity, dinners where people praised her calm, and somehow she still felt like furniture in his life. Something chosen once, then forgotten. She picked up the envelope. Her fingers didn't tremble. Not today. Inside were the expected papers. Terms, property, language that had been crafted long before today. She knew because she had overheard him. Months ago, he'd been standing in his office, not knowing she had stopped by to bring him the vintage whiskey he liked. He didn't hear her open the front door, didn't notice her presence just down the hall. Make it clean. She won't fight it, Maddox had said. She's not the type. I'll drop it by the holidays, makes everything easier with the company board. That was spring. He'd been planning this since spring. She remembered stepping back, setting the whiskey bottle on the console, and walking out. Quietly. She never mentioned it, never asked, never cried in front of him again. Now, months later, the delivery had arrived, on schedule, like a quarterly update. Araya set the envelope back down. She didn't rip it. She didn't touch her phone. She just turned and walked out of the bedroom. Downstairs, the kitchen was spotless, as always. She moved through it slowly, brushing a hand over the edge of the white quartz island. He had upgraded the counter last year, said it would make resale better. She remembered wanting a different finish, warmer, something with veins of gold. He told her it was impractical. That was the word he used for most of her preferences. Impractical, like she wasn't the woman who stood beside him when he had only one investor. The woman who stayed up all night helping him label prototypes for his first software pitch. The woman who once made soup from scratch when he lost his first deal and didn't want to get out of bed. She had once been a part of his vision. Then slowly, he'd made her invisible inside it. 2 years ago, this time of year, he surprised her with a cabin rental in Asheville. They had watched snow fall through frosted windows, fingers laced beneath shared blankets. They had kissed by the fireplace. They had dreamed of kids. Now, her lips hadn't touched his in almost 9 months. And the last thing they talked about was a dinner event he didn't want her to attend. "You don't need to come," he had said. "It's mostly investors. You won't enjoy it." She had been silent. He preferred her that way. "I married you because you were quiet," he said once, not in anger, but as if it was a compliment. She remembered freezing in that moment, realizing that the thing she thought was patience was simply his preference for submission. She walked toward the window now, still barefoot, arms folded against the cold pressing through the glass. Far below, Atlanta pulsed with life. Cars, horns, pedestrians bundled in coats. She wondered how many women in that city were quietly unloved like her. She wondered how many men called it peace when it was really absence. The clock blinked 8:04 a.m. He would be at the office by now, probably in a meeting, probably not thinking of her. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She didn't pick it up. Instead, she poured a glass of orange juice, took a sip, and looked at the place setting on the table, the one she used to set for him every morning before he stopped showing up for breakfast. She walked to the living room, grabbed her laptop, and opened her email, not to distract herself, but to focus. Her mind shifted. She had clients to respond to, an invoice to adjust, a new mood board to send over, because even though Maddox had slowly erased her from his story, she had started building one of her own. 2 years ago, Araya Rett was simply Maddox's wife. Now, quietly behind closed doors, she was Araya Brooks again, the designer behind a growing client list of boutique restaurants and high-end lounges across Atlanta. She had reactivated her name on a private LLC, registered her business email, used the money from her mother's inheritance to launch a website, all without telling him, not because she was hiding it, but because he never asked. And now, she didn't owe him an update. By noon, she had answered 3 client emails, sent off 2 samples, and confirmed an in-person walkthrough for a new downtown property. She moved with precision, but the envelope stayed on the dresser upstairs, untouched, like a silent witness to everything she no longer feared. That night, Maddox didn't call. Not even a message. She wasn't surprised. She was in bed by 10, curled up in cotton sheets she picked out herself. Her ring sat on the nightstand, next to her phone, glinting under the soft yellow lamp. She reached for it, rolled it in her palm, and finally slid it off for the last time, not with anger, but with something sharper, quieter, final. Araya woke before the alarm. The sky outside was pale grey, the kind of morning that held its breath. She sat up slowly and rested her hands on her lap. Her ring was still on the nightstand. She did not reach for it. She walked to the dresser and glanced at the envelope. It sat right where she left it, untouched, silent and heavy. She let her eyes rest on it for a moment, then turned away. She no longer felt fear. She no longer felt confusion. She felt something close to clarity, and that clarity had taken months to form. She went to the bathroom, washed her face, and tied her hair back. The mirror showed calm features. No swelling, no tear marks. The calm was real. This was not shock. It was acceptance. She stepped into the kitchen and made tea. She moved with care, as if her body already knew the path forward, even if her heart had not fully said the words yet. She sat at the island and wrapped her hands around the warm mug. This was the morning everything shifted. She felt it. She reached for her phone and opened her messages. Maddox had not written. She scrolled up through their old thread. The last message from him came 3 days ago. Dinner with investors. Home late. Before that, meeting moved. Do not wait up. Weeks of short replies. Months of distant tone. Years of her voice shrinking to match his silence. She placed the phone face down. She was done waiting for him to care. She got ready for the day. She picked a simple black sweater, fitted jeans and soft boots. She grabbed her laptop bag and walked to the elevator without glancing back at the bedroom. The lobby guard smiled at her. She smiled back, offered a polite greeting, and stepped into the cold morning air. The wind carried a quiet sting. She breathed it in and felt more awake than she had in months. She walked to her car. She paused before getting in, watching the steady stream of people along the street. Then she looked up at the tower she lived in. It was tall, sharp, impressive, but it did not feel like home. Not anymore. She drove to a small cafe 3 blocks from a project site she managed. It had warm lighting, quiet music, and people who seemed to breathe in peace. She liked that. She ordered a muffin and tea, opened her laptop, and began her work. Textures, color palettes, lighting notes. She loved this part of her life. It made her feel present. She spent an hour making revisions to a living room design for a high-end restaurant. The owner wanted a modern look with rich wood tones and soft lighting. She created 3 options and sent the files with a calm sense of pride. She closed her laptop, leaned back, and let out a slow breath. Her phone buzzed. A message from a friend she hadn't seen since summer. Her name was Soleil. "Lunch soon?" "I miss you." Araya smiled a little. The simple warmth in the message felt like a blanket around her shoulders. She typed back, "Yes, I would like that." She kept it short. She always did, but she meant the words. She needed small moments of connection, now more than ever. She gathered her things and headed to her car. She had a walkthrough at noon, and she wanted to arrive early. As she drove, her mind drifted back to the moment everything broke inside her months ago. That day, that conversation, the one she was never supposed to hear. She had walked into his office with a light step. She wanted to surprise him with the whiskey he liked. She had been nervous about interrupting him, but she wanted to try. She wanted to remind him they still had small joys. She remembered hearing his voice from down the hall. She will not fight it. She hates conflict. Send everything before the holidays. It works well for the board. She had stood there frozen, the bottle in her hand growing heavier with each passing second. His lawyer spoke next. "You want this timing because of the investor meeting?" "Yes," Maddox replied. "They want to see stability. A clean exit looks better on record." Araya had felt something break inside. A snap so soft and quiet, she almost thought she imagined it. She placed the bottle on the console and left without a sound. She never brought it up. She never asked him why. There was no need. That was the day she went silent, not because she wanted peace, but because she knew her voice did not matter to him anymore. Today she stood by that decision. She would not raise her voice for a man who preferred her quiet. She would not beg for a place in a life that treated her like a footnote. She parked at the site for her noon walk through. The building was a luxury lounge that wanted a full remodel. The owner, Jalen, greeted her with a warm smile. "Good to see you, Araya." "You too," she said with a soft nod. They walked through the space. She pointed out fixtures that needed updating. They discussed layout changes. She took notes and photos. Her mind stayed sharp, focused. When they finished, Jalen looked at her with a curious tilt of his head. "You look lighter," he said. "Something different about you." She did not smile, but she did not deny it. "Something changed," she said. "Good change?" She met his eyes. She held his gaze for a moment, then spoke in a steady voice. "Yes, a needed change." He nodded in respect. "If you ever need anything, you know where to find me." "Thank you," she said. She left the site and returned to her car. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Maddox's assistant. Reminder to review the documents. Araya stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she placed the phone in the passenger seat and drove home in silence. By the time she reached the penthouse, the sun had dipped behind the skyline, painting the glass with soft blue shadows. She walked into the bedroom and stood before the dresser again. The envelope waited. She picked it up this time. She opened it. She read every page. The terms were clean, cold, precise. Her life was arranged into sections. Her marriage turned into numbered points. She let the papers fall onto the dresser. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and looked around the room. She thought of the girl who married him, hopeful, warm, eager to build a life. She had loved him with full trust, loved him with full heart. Now she looked at the life she lived, the long nights, the quiet dinners alone, the cold messages, the lipstick on his collar she never questioned, the holidays he spent away, the way her voice grew softer each year until she barely heard it herself. She placed her hands flat on her knees. This was the final straw. She would not break this Christmas. She would rise. She walked back to the dresser, picked up her ring, and placed it inside a small velvet box. She closed the lid. She left the box on the dresser next to the envelope. Then, she walked out of the room. She did not turn back. She did not need to. This chapter of her life had already closed, and she was ready for the story waiting on the other side. The following morning was quiet. No phone calls, no new emails, not even a calendar reminder from Maddox's assistant. Araya sat at her desk in the corner of the living room, sunlight streaking across the floor, warming the edges of the space. She had moved her work area there months ago when she realized she preferred natural light over the sterile silence of the study Maddox insisted on furnishing. She glanced at her planner. Her name was written in soft gold foil on the cover, Araya B., not Rhett. It had been a subtle shift. One day, while renewing a business license, she used her birth name, not for revenge, not to hide, but because it felt like the right time to be her again. She opened her laptop and checked the dashboard for her business. Brooks and Soul Interiors. That was the name she chose. It sounded like her. Grounded, intentional, soft but steady. She scrolled through new inquiries. 3 new requests. One was a referral from a boutique hotel client she'd worked with in East Atlanta. She smiled gently. Nobody saw this version of her when she was just Mrs. Rhett. Back then, people spoke to Maddox in meetings, even when she was the one holding the design samples. A soft ping broke her thoughts. A new email came in. It was from a potential client, a small black-owned wine bar planning a winter relaunch. They wanted her to bring warmth and elegance to their lounge without losing the soul of the place. Araya read through the note slowly. Every detail made her feel seen. She typed a reply with ease, her fingers moving with a calm certainty. Hello, Camille. Thank you for reaching out. I love your vision already, and I'd be honored to help bring it to life. She sent the message, then leaned back in her chair. For a moment, she did nothing. No rush, no distraction, just a pause to breathe. Then she stood up and walked into the kitchen. The sun hit the white countertops, the same ones Maddox insisted on. They felt too cold for her now, but this morning, she didn't dwell on it. She filled a pot with water and turned on the stove. Her phone buzzed against the counter. A message, this time not from Maddox's assistant. It was from her best friend, Nia. You disappeared again. Are you okay? Araya stared at the message for a second before typing back. I'm okay now. She pressed send before she could rethink it. Nia called a minute later, no hesitation. Don't text me something cryptic like that and then vanish, she said with a dry laugh. What's going on? Araya walked to the window and let the morning breeze hit her face through the small crack she'd left open. He sent the papers, she said. There was silence on the other end. Then a slow breath from Nia. And? I didn't sign them. Good. Araya didn't respond right away. Nia waited, like she always did. Not rushing, not poking. Finally, Araya added, but I didn't tear them up either. I just saw them. And I realized I wasn't hurt, not the way I thought I would be, because you already grieved it. Araya nodded, then realized she needed to say it aloud. Yes, you've been grieving this marriage in silence for years, Araya. Her friend's voice was warm, but steady. It didn't coddle. It didn't inflame. It told the truth. I think I'm starting to see myself again, Araya said softly. Nia's voice dropped to a murmur. Good, because that version of you. She built magic before he dimmed it. After the call, Araya made a list. Not for groceries, not for chores, but for herself. She titled the page, What I Want Now. 1. Peace. 2. My own studio space. 3. Sunlight and plants. 4. Warm meals shared without silence. 5. Work that feeds me, not drains me. 6. Love. If it's real, if it sees me. She stared at that last line. She didn't delete it. That afternoon, she went to the site of her latest project, an upscale real estate complex, turning old row homes into luxury townhouses. The lobby was under construction. Dust floated in sunlight. A man in a charcoal suit was talking with the project lead. His back was to her. He turned, and that was the first time Araya saw Orion Black in person. He wasn't what she expected. She'd seen his name on permits and city development boards. He had a reputation, powerful, decisive, well-connected. But the man who turned to greet her had no arrogance in his stance. He had presence. Tall, brown skin with deep undertones, neatly trimmed beard, a quiet face, observant. He wore a watch, but no flash. His energy wasn't loud. He extended his hand. "You must be Miss Brooks." "Araya," she said, returning the shake. "Yes, Orion Black. I'm one of the project's silent backers. I've seen your design mock-ups. They're solid." She thanked him. They talked logistics for 5 minutes. Brief, focused, professional. But when he looked at her, she noticed something. He was listening, not pretending to, not waiting to interrupt, actually listening. She hadn't felt that in years, not since her mother passed. As she left the site later, she replayed the conversation. Nothing dramatic, nothing flirtatious, just clear, simple respect. But it stayed with her, not because of what he said, but because of how seen she felt. That evening, Araya stood in her walk-in closet, staring at her clothes. So many of them were gifts from Maddox's stylists, pieces that looked good in photos, but didn't feel like her. She pulled out a soft cardigan she hadn't worn in years. It smelled like lavender. She put it on. She curled into the couch with her laptop, finished a few designs, then shut the screen. Her ring box still sat on the dresser upstairs. She didn't touch it. She no longer needed it to remind her who she was. She was remembering all on her own. A week passed. Atlanta moved in its usual rhythm. Traffic, meetings, shifting weather. But inside Araya's world, things had grown steady. She focused on her projects, kept her circles small, woke early, slept deeply. But one name kept returning in her thoughts. Orion Black. She didn't look him up, didn't stalk his socials, didn't tell herself a story about him. But she remembered the way he listened. On Wednesday, her phone rang while she was reviewing a materials order. The caller ID surprised her. It was a number linked to the townhouse project. But it wasn't the general contractor, it was him. She picked up. Voice calm. "Hello? Ms. Brooks," he said, warm and direct. "It's Orion Black. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "You're not," she replied. "And Araya is fine." A pause. Then, "All right, Araya." His voice wrapped around her name slowly. No emphasis, no flirt, just respect. "I'm calling about the model unit. I want to walk through it with you in person. Would tomorrow morning work?" She glanced at her planner. Tomorrow was clear. Yes. "What time?" 9 a.m. "I'll send the details. I'll bring coffee." The line clicked off after that. No long closing, no awkward goodbye. Just clean, sure. The next morning, she arrived 10 minutes early. The model unit was quiet, still unfinished. But the structure was clear. Exposed wood beams, bright windows, open kitchen. It had bones she liked. She took off her coat and laid it on the counter. Orion walked in at exactly 9. Coffee in hand, files under his arm, dark grey coat tailored over a soft black turtleneck. He looked more relaxed today. Less boardroom, more thoughtful. "Hazelnut," he said, offering her the cup. "Your site manager said it's your favorite." She blinked. She hadn't told anyone that directly. "You remembered that?" "I pay attention." He said it simply, like it wasn't a big deal. But it was. They moved through the unit. She explained lighting plans, suggested swapping the overhead fixtures for something softer. He listened, asked a few questions, and nodded without interrupting. Then came the living area. "Show me how you'd make this feel less like money and more like home," he said. She turned to face him. "I'd bring in texture," she replied. "Not just luxury for the sake of price tags. Warm tones, layered wood, some local art. Maybe floor-to-ceiling linen curtains, light that moves. Not just light that shines." He held her gaze. "Not like the penthouses." "No," she said. "Not like those." He smiled, small but real. "I like how you think." They sat at the edge of the island. He opened his files, but they didn't talk design right away. Instead, the quiet settled. And then he said, "I've seen your work before." She tilted her head. "Where?" "A restaurant on Piedmont. That space with the rust tones and those curved leather booths." She smiled. "Elan Wine Lounge. I didn't know it was you until last week. Most people don't." He looked at her, then said, "You like staying under the radar." She thought about it. "I like when my work speaks louder than my name." "Smart," he said. "Rare." The conversation drifted. He asked what got her into design. She shared a memory of being 9, rearranging her mother's living room while she was at work. Her mom didn't scold her. She sat down and said, "I don't know why, but it feels better." Orion told her about growing up in South Atlanta, watching the city change block by block. His first job was hauling drywall. He didn't have much, but he had eyes, and those got him into rooms others were kept out of. They talked like people who weren't performing, like people who had nothing to prove, but still carried everything they'd earned. A soft moment passed. He watched her sip her coffee. She noticed his hand, strong, steady, rested on the file. There was no rush, no suggestion, just stillness. It was the first time in a long time she didn't feel the need to shrink. Before leaving, he said, "I have a project coming up next quarter. Bigger scope, political attention. I'll need someone who knows how to make things feel human." She raised an eyebrow. "You're asking me?" "I'm saying I'm watching. If it makes sense, I'll ask." She nodded slowly. "All right." He held the door open for her, not out of show, but out of rhythm. She walked past him, and they exited the space together. Later that night, she lay on her couch, legs tucked beneath her, sipping ginger tea. Her inbox had new updates. Her calendar had new meetings. But her thoughts returned to the quiet moments in that model unit. The man who paid attention. The space that felt like a beginning. She didn't smile. But something inside her softened. And for now, that was enough. Have you ever met someone who didn't try to fix you, but simply saw you? If you've ever felt that shift, when silence turns into safety, tell us in the comments. Tap like if Araya's quiet strength speaks to you. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful love stories like this. The weekend came with rain. Soft, constant. The kind of drizzle that never poured but lingered like an old thought. Araya didn't mind it. She kept her windows cracked just enough to let the breeze in. She moved through her apartment with slow energy. Candle lit, jazz playing low in the background, her work laptop closed, phone silenced. She hadn't heard from Maddox. Not a call, not a message, not even a question about the envelope she hadn't signed. It was strange how silence could shift. Months ago, it used to sting. Now, it felt like space to breathe. Sunday afternoon, her phone buzzed. A new message from an unfamiliar number. "Tomorrow at 4? Walkthrough on North Avenue. If you're open." OB. She stared at it for a beat. Then typed a reply. "I'm open." No smiley, no formality, but her heart moved. Monday came. The North Avenue property was one of Orion's upcoming renovations, a forgotten school, building he planned to convert into a multi-use space for education and wellness. Araya arrived early, again. She liked seeing spaces before they were explained. It helped her feel the energy before numbers got in the way. The building was tall and quiet, its bones solid despite the years. She stepped through the open front doors, boots echoing on the old floorboards. Orion was already inside. Black wool coat, collar turned up, clipboard in hand. He looked over his shoulder when she walked in. "No coffee this time," she teased, voice light. He smiled. "You beat me here." Again. She stepped forward and took the clipboard from his hand without asking. Looked through the renovation outline. "You plan to keep the original staircase?" she asked. "If I can, good bones. Don't rip out what doesn't need fixing." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Exactly." They walked the halls. The old classrooms still had chalkboards, some broken chairs. Sunlight pushed through dusty windows. Orion moved like he already saw what it could be. But he paused when she placed her hand on the wood trim lining the hallway. "You see something?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "Warmth." He raised an eyebrow. "Most developers see these buildings as blank slates. But spaces like this, they have stories. You don't erase stories. You layer them." He looked at her like she had spoken in a language he hadn't heard in a while. Or maybe one he'd been waiting for. Later, they walked into the old gym. The ceilings were high. The echo was full. She stood in the center, arms folded, slowly turning, imagining light installations, wall art, community events. She didn't speak right away. He stood nearby, watching, not crowding. Then he said something unexpected. "You don't perform." She looked over at him. He clarified, "You don't try to be impressive. That's rare in this city." Araya didn't respond at first. "Then, I stopped performing a long time ago. I lost too much of myself doing that." Orion held her gaze. No one should have to lose themselves just to be loved. Her throat tightened. She nodded once. "I know that now." They didn't say anything for a while. And somehow it wasn't awkward. The quiet between them had room in it. Room for thought. Room for respect. Orion looked toward the far wall and then back at her. "You free for dinner?" Her eyes lifted. "Tonight? Just food, talk, no pressure." She didn't answer right away. She thought of all the times Maddox made her feel small. All the dinners that weren't shared. All the conversations she had with herself while sitting across from a man who never looked up from his phone. This felt different, still soft. "But sure, yes," she said. He walked her to her car after the walkthrough. They paused by her driver door. "I'll text you the place," he said. She nodded. He opened the door for her, not because she couldn't, but because he wanted to. That night, Araya stood in front of her mirror. She didn't try to look perfect. She chose a soft olive dress that moved when she walked. No heavy makeup, just herself, clean and simple. She looked at her reflection and whispered, "You're allowed to want more." The restaurant wasn't flashy. It wasn't the kind Maddox would have chosen, the kind with endless tasting menus and rooms so quiet you were afraid to laugh. This one had warm wood, real conversation, and low lighting that wrapped every table in peace. The music was subtle, old soul classics that made people sway in their chairs without knowing it. Araya arrived right on time. She stepped inside and took a slow breath. The scent of roasted garlic and fire-grilled meat filled the space, the kind of place where no one needed to pretend. Orion stood as soon as he saw her. He wasn't in a suit tonight. Dark jeans, button-down shirt, coat over the back of his chair. Clean, relaxed, but still carrying that quiet authority like he was born with it. "You came," he said, stepping forward. "You asked," she replied. He smiled and pulled out her chair. She sat, easing into the moment. The waitress approached. They both ordered without much fuss. She asked for roasted salmon and vegetables. He went for braised short ribs and mashed potatoes. Simple, real. When the waitress walked away, Araya leaned back. "You always eat like this?" she asked, playfully. "Only when I want to remember what food's supposed to taste like," he said. She nodded. "Same." Then the silence stretched, not awkward, but full. Finally he asked, "How long have you been designing under your own name?" She thought for a second. "About 10 months officially. Quietly, 2 years. No partners?" "No. I wanted full say in the vision." He nodded like he understood. "I respect that," he said. "A lot of people want the reward. They don't want the risk." Araya's voice was soft, but certain. "I've already lived the risk. Starting over wasn't scary. Staying stuck was." Orion looked at her for a long beat. "You ever talk about him?" he asked gently. "Maddox?" He didn't say the name. She did. "I used to. With myself mostly," she said. "Now? Only when someone asks." He nodded once. "I won't bring him up again." She met his eyes. "You can. I'm not hiding. I just don't live there anymore." Their food came. They talked about Atlanta. It's changing neighborhoods, the parts that kept their history, the ones that lost it. Orion told her about his first real estate deal, how it went sideways because he trusted the wrong person. "I thought being right was enough," he said. "Turns out, people will still lie to you, even when they need you." Araya stirred her vegetables slowly. "Especially when they need you." That earned a short, understanding glance. He asked her what she loved most about her work. She thought for a second, then replied, "Watching people walk into a space that feels like them, even if they didn't know what they wanted when we started." "That's a gift," he said. "Not really," she shrugged. "Just a kind of listening." "You listen well." They lingered after the plates were cleared. No rushing, no looking at watches. Time bent around them like it understood this wasn't something to interrupt. Eventually the check came. Orion took it without a word. She didn't argue. As they stepped outside, the cold hit them gently. The sidewalk was quiet, wet from earlier rain, glistening under the streetlights. They walked slowly toward her car, no one else in sight. He paused when they reached her door. "I didn't bring you here to impress you," he said. "I know," she replied. "You brought me somewhere you respect." He smiled again. "Just a little. And I didn't ask to see you again to get anything." She held his gaze. "I know that too." He nodded, then added, "Still, I hope this wasn't the last time." She looked up at him. "It doesn't feel like the last time." He stepped back slightly, giving her space. "Good night, Araya." "Good night, Orion." She got into her car, closed the door, and sat still for a moment before turning the key. Her heart was quiet, not racing, but full. That kind of full that comes when someone doesn't touch you, but makes you feel held anyway. Back in her apartment, she pulled off her boots and poured a glass of water. She didn't check her phone, didn't post anything, didn't call anyone. She lit a candle, changed into her robe, and stood at her window, watching the city lights blink across the skyline. The penthouse used to feel like a cage. Tonight, it felt like a landing spot, one she wasn't afraid to grow out of. 3 days after the dinner, Araya's name was tagged in a local Atlanta business blog. Nothing major, just a highlight under the Women You Should Know section. A small feature, a 2-paragraph spotlight, no dramatic headline, but it traveled. It mentioned her company, Brooks & Soul Interiors, and named 3 properties she had designed, 2 of which were spaces Orion had backed. It described her work as intentional, warm, and quietly brilliant. When Araya saw it, she blinked twice, unsure if she was reading it right. She hadn't submitted anything, hadn't pitched herself. The writer had simply found her. She was drinking tea in her living room when her phone started pinging. First, from Nia. "Girl, you didn't tell me you were out here getting profiled. And looking like that? Okay then." Then, from a restaurant client. "Just read the article. Proud to be one of your early believers." And then, a name she hadn't seen light up her phone in over a month. Maddox. She didn't open the message. Not yet. Later that afternoon, she stepped into her studio, her own space she rented inside a shared creative building in West Midtown. It had tall windows, 2 plants she kept alive somehow, a wall of color swatches, and a desk that always smelled faintly of wood polish and lavender. This was hers. She had 2 back-to-back meetings scheduled. One of them was with Camille, the wine bar owner who had reached out the week before. Camille brought her partner, and they both looked at Araya like she already belonged in the room. "You just get it," Camille said, as Araya walked them through a mood board. "We want it to feel like you're still in Atlanta, but somehow more alive," her partner added. "Like something southern, but elevated." "You know," Araya smiled. "I do." The meeting ended with smiles and handshakes. Outside the glass door, Orion was waiting. Not for her, for a meeting with someone 2 doors down. But when their eyes met, he stepped forward. "I saw the feature," he said. "Congratulations." She shrugged gently. It wasn't planned, all the more reason to celebrate it. He didn't linger, didn't make it about him, just that small moment of affirmation. Before he turned to leave, he paused. I meant what I said the other night, he told her. I'd like to bring you in on a larger project. But only if the pace makes sense to you. She looked up at him. I'm ready when the work is right. He nodded, then smiled. Good. Then he walked away. And somehow, her heart beat a little slower instead of faster. That's what safety felt like. Later that night, back home, she finally opened Maddox's message. Nice press. Didn't know you were doing so much behind the scenes. Short. No punctuation. No warmth. Araya stared at the screen. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. The next day, Maddox called. She let it ring. Then again, later that night. She declined it. Then another text. We should talk. In person. No, they shouldn't. But she wasn't angry. Not bitter. Just done. She closed the messages and opened her laptop. One of her new clients had sent an early deposit. Her business was growing. Her peace was intact. Her voice was no longer something she whispered inside herself. Araya was adjusting a fabric sample under warm afternoon light when the front desk called her studio line. Hi, Miss Brooks. There's a Mr. Rhett here. Says he knows you personally and insists on speaking to you in person. Her breath didn't catch. Her hands didn't shake. But her reply was calm and clipped. Tell him I'm in the middle of work. If he wants a meeting, he can book one. There was a pause. Then the front desk answered, Will do. She hung up, leaned back in her chair, and stared at the open floor plan in front of her. A year ago, she might have walked outside. 6 months ago, she might have let him interrupt. But today, she didn't. 20 minutes later, she received a text. I'm downstairs. I'll wait. She didn't respond. An hour passed. She walked to the restroom, refilled her water, sent 2 client emails, approved a vendor invoice, and wrapped up a materials checklist. Then, without emotion, she grabbed her coat and walked to the elevator, not because Maddox demanded it, because she chose it. He was still there, sitting in the small lobby, coat off, phone in hand. When he looked up and saw her walking toward him, his eyes flicked with something. Confusion? Uncertainty. He stood. Fast. She stopped a few feet away. Maddox, she said plainly. He searched her face for something he couldn't name. You're busy now? He asked. I run a business, she replied. His jaw flexed. Right. The silence wasn't friendly, but it wasn't angry either. It was simply hers. I saw the article, he said. I figured you didn't think to mention you were working with Black. I didn't think you were entitled to know. The words weren't cruel. They were factual. Maddox blinked. He had expected resistance. He hadn't expected composure. You've changed, he said. No. You stopped paying attention. He exhaled sharply. Look, I didn't come here to fight. I came here because I wanted to talk face to face. About what's happening. About us. There is no us, she said. I'm still your husband. You mailed me the papers, and you didn't sign them. Not because I wanted you back, because I needed time to remember I didn't. That one hit. Hard. He stepped back, slightly. Not physically, just in presence. She continued. You planned a Christmas divorce like it was a business move. You saw me as a checkbox, something to quietly erase. And you expected I'd just vanish. He didn't deny it. She stepped forward 1 inch. Not threatening, not emotional, but final. I'm not yours anymore, Maddox. Not emotionally, not mentally, not spiritually. I'm free. Whether I sign those papers today or in January won't change that. His throat moved like he swallowed a hard truth. Then he said something low. You're seeing him. She tilted her head. I'm seeing myself. He stared at her, still trying to find a crack. She gave him none. She walked past him and pressed the elevator button. When it dinged open, she paused. You don't have to wait for me anymore. Then she stepped inside and let the doors close. Back in her studio, she poured a cup of tea. Orion hadn't called, hadn't sent a message, hadn't shown up. He didn't need to. He moved like water, never pushing but always present. That night, She sat on her couch, legs under a blanket, and wrote a note in her journal. When someone sees you as small, your silence looks like surrender. But when you remember who you are, your silence becomes power. 3 days before Christmas, the envelope arrived. It was cream-colored, thick, and hand-addressed. The kind of stationery reserved for things people wanted you to feel important about. Araya found it in her studio mailbox, tucked between a vendor invoice and a holiday card from one of her first clients. No return address. But she recognized the handwriting instantly. It was from Maddox's assistant. She didn't open it right away. She sat behind her desk, fingers tracing the corner of the envelope, wondering what kind of man sends a Christmas party invitation to the woman he asked to divorce. After 10 minutes, she broke the seal. Inside, a single card. Elegant, sharp serif font, holiday green. The Ret Annual Winter Gala, December 24th, 7 p.m. sharp. Glassmore Estate, formal attire requested your presence is expected. No dear Araya, no signature, no warmth, just expectation. It was the same event she once spent weeks helping plan. The same event she arranged centerpieces for by hand. The same event she stopped being invited to the moment he decided she wasn't good for his image. She turned the card over, nothing on the back. She slid it back into the envelope, placed it on her desk, and stared out the window for a while. Later that evening, she called Nia. Her voice was casual but steady. "You're not seriously thinking about going, are you?" Nia asked. "I haven't decided yet. It's a trap." "I know. He wants a reaction. He wants to remind you of his status." Araya didn't disagree, but she didn't say no either. There was something else in her silence. The next morning, Orion called. Not texted. Called. "Morning," he said. "Hey, I have a question, but I want to ask it right." She smiled softly, leaning on the edge of her kitchen counter. "All right. Do you want to walk into a certain gala with me, or would that be too loud?" She paused. "You heard? Word travels in this city, especially when rich men start shaking." She exhaled once. "Are you sure?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "I don't make offers I'm not ready to walk beside." Her hand gripped the edge of the counter. "Then yes," she said. "I'll pick you up. Wear something you like." Not what he'd expect. That afternoon, she went shopping. Not for revenge, not for shock. For expression. She found a gown that hugged her shape in all the places she used to hide. It was a deep wine red, bold but not loud, soft velvet, one shoulder bare, clean lines, no glitter. When she tried it on, she didn't look like someone trying to win. She looked like someone who already had. That night, she laid the gown across her bed. She didn't touch it again. She didn't need to. Just knowing it was there reminded her she was walking in with presents and leaving on her own terms. Christmas Eve, 6:45 p.m. Orion's car pulled up in front of Araya's building. No driver, no black-tinted SUV, just him, behind the wheel, on time, present. She watched him from her window before heading down. He stepped out as she approached, wearing a black tuxedo with a subtle satin lapel. No flash, no performance, just precision. His eyes met hers, and for a second, he didn't move. He looked at her, fully. Her gown clung to her body like it knew her shape before she did. Deep red, one shoulder bare, no necklace, no earrings. Her hair swept back into a soft twist, the kind of look that said nothing but held everything. Orion opened the door for her. "You look like silence and fire at the same time," he said. Araya stepped in without breaking eye contact. "You clean up well too." The ride was quiet, not awkward, not overly warm, balanced. She glanced over once. His hand rested casually on the wheel, strong, steady, present. He didn't fill the silence. He shared it. The Glassmore estate came into view, columns lit in gold, valet already forming a line of luxury sedans. Orion pulled into the private entrance. The security detail at the gate recognized him immediately and opened the barrier without a word. Inside, music floated through the night air. Classic jazz, holiday notes. Glasses clinking behind doors. A few guests stepped outside for air, but turned quickly when the car door opened. Araya stepped out first, straight-backed, unrushed, controlled grace. Orion exited beside her and offered his arm. She took it, not like she needed it, but like she chose it. Together, they walked toward the entrance. As the glass doors opened, the room shifted. Conversations paused. Eyes turned. Forks froze mid-air. She saw Maddox almost instantly, standing beside a woman in a sparkling silver dress. A new date, the kind with rehearsed laughter and a perfect grip on his arm. But Maddox's eyes weren't on the woman beside him. They were on Araya. He blinked once, then again. His face didn't break, not completely, but something in his posture faltered. Because she wasn't shaking. She wasn't hiding. She was glowing on the arm of a man who didn't look confused to stand beside her. They didn't walk fast. They didn't announce themselves. They just arrived, and the room adjusted to them. Orion greeted a few familiar faces with nods, handshakes, but he stayed close. Araya held her head high. No smiles for performance, no reaction to the whispers. She didn't come to show off. She came to exist fully, and that, in itself, was louder than anything she could have worn. Maddox made his way across the room slowly. Araya saw him coming. She didn't flinch. Orion turned his head slightly. Araya gave him the smallest nod. He stepped back respectfully, but close enough to remain a presence. Maddox stopped 2 feet in front of her. He didn't greet her. He stared for a beat too long. "You look—" He stopped. She didn't help him finish. Then he tried again. "You came. I was invited," she said. He glanced at Orion, then back at her. "You brought him?" She tilted her head. "You wanted a reaction. You didn't say I had to come alone." He hesitated. "You're still my wife." Araya's voice didn't rise. "Not after tonight." That was all she said. Then she turned, rejoined Orion, and walked away. They didn't linger. They didn't overstay. They left after 20 minutes. Enough time to speak without speaking. Enough time to say, "I am not who you left." Back in the car, Orion didn't speak first. Araya did. "Thank you." He turned his head slightly, one hand still on the wheel. "For what?" "For walking beside me without making me feel like I owed you for it." He looked at her with that same quiet gaze. "Araya," he said slowly, "you don't owe anyone for rising." She looked out the window and smiled, not wide, just long enough to know this night would stay with her for years. The next morning, the sky was silver. Clouds blanketed the skyline like soft wool, and the city felt slower than usual, as if even Atlanta needed a moment to process what happened the night before. Inside Araya's apartment, it was warm, quiet. She stood barefoot in her kitchen, hair loosely wrapped, dressed in an oversized shirt and nothing else. Her gown from the night before hung over a chair, the fabric still holding the scent of the air outside, a memory in silk. Her phone lit up with messages. Nia, Soleil, clients, even an old design school peer who hadn't spoken to her in years. "Was that really you at the Ret Gala? You looked powerful. Who's the man?" She didn't reply. She placed her phone face down, poured herself tea, and walked to the window. The world didn't know it yet, but she hadn't walked into that gala for attention. She walked in to reclaim silence. At the same moment across town, Maddox sat alone in his high-rise office. His tie was loosened, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. A glass of untouched whiskey sat on the table beside him. He hadn't touched it. Couldn't. He had expected Araya to arrive. He even expected she'd look good. But he didn't expect that. Didn't expect the man. Didn't expect the confidence. Didn't expect to feel small. That had never happened before. Maddox was used to owning rooms. But last night, the room bowed to Araya. He had money. He had control. But what she had? Presence. Back in Araya's apartment, a soft knock came at the door. She paused, walked over, opened it slowly. Orion stood there, in a hoodie, jeans, and holding a brown paper bag. "Didn't think you'd want flowers," he said. "So, croissant." A laugh escaped her lips. Short, honest. "Come in." He stepped inside. The air between them was calm, easy. She moved to clear the table. He set the bag down and pulled out 2 pastries and a small container of honey butter. "You always bring food," she said. He shrugged. "You always show up hungry for more than just answers." She sat across from him. No makeup, no posture, no performance, and he didn't look away. They ate slowly. He didn't ask questions about last night. He didn't comment on Maddox. He didn't make it about the moment they had shared. Instead, he said something simple. "I meant what I said. I'll walk beside you." She looked at him. Really looked. "I'm not someone you fix." "I know," he said. "You were never broken." The words sat in the room like sunlight. She leaned back in her chair. "Thank you for not rushing me." He nodded. "We move at your pace, or we don't move." She breathed in, not because she was nervous, because she was seen. Later, he helped her hang her coat properly. Later, he touched her hand briefly at the wrist, before leaving. And later, when she stood in her doorway watching him walk down the hall, she whispered to herself, "This is what it feels like when love doesn't push. It just waits." The envelope was still on the dresser, unopened again, unbothered, untouched, not out of fear, but because, until now, it hadn't deserved her time. Araya stood in her bedroom, wrapped in her robe, the soft morning light pouring in through the sheer curtains. Her hair was tied back. Her eyes were clear. She reached for the envelope. This time, not as a woman second-guessing, not as a wife, as herself. She opened it. One by one, she read through the contents again. The language was sharp, clean, predictable, like Maddox. The terms hadn't changed, but she had. She walked over to her small desk in the corner of the room, pulled out a pen, and signed where her name belonged. There was no music playing, no dramatic wind, no shaking hands, just ink and finality. She folded the papers neatly, slid them into the return envelope, sealed it, and stood. Done. No breakdown. No long goodbye. Only peace. That evening, she walked the envelope to the mailbox herself. She could have had it picked up, but she wanted to feel the final step. She stood at the box for a moment. A passing car honked. Somewhere down the street, a woman was laughing on the phone. Life went on, and now, so would she. She slipped the envelope through the slot. It made a soft sound when it hit the metal inside. Her shoulders didn't drop. Her body didn't sigh, because it wasn't a release. It was a rise. Back home, she made herself dinner. No takeout, no frozen tray. She poured a glass of red wine, sautéed garlic in a skillet, and let music float through the apartment. She danced in the kitchen for a few seconds. Not wildly, just softly, like she'd made it. Later that night, she sat on her balcony, barefoot, wrapped in a soft throw. Orion texted, "All good?" She replied, signed it, mailed it. "I'm good." He didn't press, just sent back, "That's your beginning." Not his ending. She didn't cry, didn't overthink it. She put her phone down, curled her feet under the blanket, and looked up at the sky. Nothing hurt, nothing burned, nothing stayed heavy. She was no longer waiting to be chosen. She had already chosen herself. Have you ever held on to something because you were afraid to let go, even when it already let go of you? If Araya's piece spoke to you today, drop A in the comments, tap, like, and subscribe for more real, raw stories that stay with you. Maddox stared at the notification on his phone. Your package was received. It was the return envelope. Signed, delivered, final. His jaw tensed as he sat in his office, blinds half drawn, city lights painting faint stripes across the wall. He hadn't expected her to sign. He expected pushback, delay. some trace of regret. But she gave him none. No last call, no lingering questions, not even a one-line reply. She ended it with the same quiet strength she used to carry through their silence-filled home. Only this time, it didn't belong to him. He leaned back in his chair. Suddenly, everything he once claimed to control felt like it was slipping through fingers too proud to grip. The gala had shattered something. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't flaunted wealth. She had simply arrived, radiant, whole, untouchable. And Orion? He didn't compete. He didn't posture. He just stood beside her. That image refused to leave Maddox's mind. Elsewhere in the city, Araya stood in her studio, finishing up a late afternoon consult. Her new assistant, Taryn, handed her a coffee and a smile. "You've got another referral. Woman from Buckhead saw your work at Camille's place. Wants a full redesign of her boutique." Araya smiled gently. "That's good." "Orion called too," Taryn added. "Said no rush, but if you have time this week, he wants to show you a new property." Araya's eyes softened. "Thanks, I'll call him." That evening, she did. He picked up on the second ring. "You working late?" she asked. "Always," he replied. "But I'm thinking about slowing down for the right reason." She leaned against her window, looking out over the quiet stretch of Midtown. "You said something last week," she said, "about a larger project. You still want me involved?" "Only if you want to help shape the vision," he replied. "What's the scale?" "A city block, retail, housing, community space. I'm not chasing luxury. I want it to mean something." Her heart beat once, deeper than usual. "I want in," she said. He didn't speak for a second. "Then let's build something that lives longer than either of us." Back in Maddox's office, he opened an old folder on his drive. Inside, their wedding photos. He stared at one. Their first dance. She had been smiling, eyes closed, head near his shoulder. He hadn't looked at her once during the entire dance. He clicked out of the file. For the first time, he understood. He didn't lose her because of Orion. He lost her because he never saw her to begin with. The morning air was crisp. Araya stepped out of her car in black boots, soft jeans, and a camel coat that wrapped around her like a quiet kind of power. She looked down the long, empty street. Old storefronts lined the block, some boarded up, others cracked with age, but there was history here. Orion stood near the corner, clipboard in hand, phone tucked into his coat pocket. When he saw her, his posture shifted, but not to perform, to welcome. "Morning," he said. She joined him, hands in her pockets. "You said you wanted to build something here." He nodded, looking down the block. Mixed use. Spaces for people to live, work and breathe without having to leave their zip code just to feel safe. She turned to face him. "You've been thinking about this a long time." "Since I was a teenager," he said. "Most of what I saw growing up got torn down. They rebuilt it for people who didn't look like us, didn't sound like us. I want something different." She let the words settle. "Why bring me in?" she asked quietly. He looked at her. "Because he always did. You don't decorate. You design for function, for feeling, for future." She felt her chest expand slightly. "You see people in your spaces," he added. "Not just color palettes." She looked back at the block, the cracked sidewalks, the potential. "What do you want it to feel like?" He paused. "That's the question I've never had someone else ask me." She smiled, then said, "Let's walk." They moved from storefront to storefront. One could be a cafe, another a childcare center. He mentioned turning a corner lot into a pocket park with benches and art from local teens. But as they walked, she noticed something. He wasn't just showing her ideas. He was waiting for hers. She stopped in front of a narrow building with high windows. "This one," she said. "This should be your anchor." He turned. "Why?" "Because it doesn't shout. It waits to be discovered. Like trust." His eyes stayed on her for a beat longer than usual. "You want to sketch something out for it?" he asked. "I already have it in my head." They walked the full block twice. Not once did he check his phone. Not once did he talk over her. When they stopped again, Orion said, "This isn't a job offer, Araya. She looked at him. "This is an invitation," he continued, "to help build something that will carry both our names, not a proposal, not a pitch, an offer of vision, shared." They sat on the tailgate of his truck, coffee in hand, sun warming their faces. He leaned back, one foot resting on the bumper. "Do you ever want to leave this city?" he asked. "Sometimes," she said, "but not in the running away sense, more in the growing beyond it way." He nodded slowly. "If you ever want to do both, stay and grow, I want to be part of that." She didn't respond right away. She didn't need to. Her presence was her answer. That evening she opened her sketchbook at home. She drew the anchor space first, then the curve of the cafe beside it, then a community wall for rotating local art. And in the corner, she drew a tree, not because it matched the layout, but because she realized something. She wasn't rebuilding anymore. She was planting. The new studio space smelled like fresh paint and sawdust. Araya stood near the front window, clipboard in hand, hair pulled up, sleeves rolled. It wasn't glamorous work, but it made her feel rooted. She was standing in what would become the design hub for the entire North Avenue project. Orion had insisted she pick the space herself. "I want your fingerprints on this block," he'd said, and she took that seriously. Today was a supplier walkthrough, tile samples, lighting checks, budget conversations, all the things that once overwhelmed her when she was only doing side work from the penthouse kitchen. Now she was the lead. No one questioned it. No one waited for a man to approve her voice. The site manager walked her through a backorder issue, and she handled it calmly, adjusting delivery timelines, reshuffling installation dates, asking sharp questions. By the time the vendor left, even he looked impressed. "You really don't miss anything," he said. "I can't afford to," she replied. Around noon, Orion stopped by. No fanfare, just a knock on the open glass and a brown bag in his hand. "Lunch. You haven't eaten, have you?" She raised an eyebrow. "You make a habit of feeding people?" He smirked. "Only the ones building with me." They sat on a stack of unopened tile boxes, unwrapping sandwiches and sharing. Water bottles like two people who'd known each other longer than they had. "You good?" he asked after a few minutes. She nodded. "Better than good. You feel settled?" "I feel seen." He didn't press further. He just nodded and stayed. At 3:30, she stepped outside to take a short walk, clear her head, breathe. That's when she saw him, Maddox, standing across the street near the parked line of contractor vans. He didn't wave, didn't smile. He just waited. Her breath slowed. She crossed the street, not to chase, to end it. When she reached him, he looked her up and down, not in judgment, in disbelief. "You're really doing this," he said. She tilted her head. "What did you think I was doing? I thought you needed space. I didn't realize you were building an empire." She let that sit. "You walked out," he added. "Now the world's walking in." She crossed her arms gently, not defensive, just grounded. "You didn't lose me because of what I'm doing now. You lost me because you never looked at me when I wasn't doing anything at all." He swallowed. "You never replied to my messages," he said, softer now. I had nothing left to say. He paused, then added, "Do you love him?" She blinked, then spoke clearly. "I love myself in his presence." That was the truth. That was the end. She turned and walked away, didn't look back. And this time, he didn't call her name. Back at the site, Orion was reviewing blueprint revisions with the project engineer. When Araya walked back in, she didn't say a word. She just picked up her notebook, stood beside him, and joined the conversation like nothing had shaken her. Because nothing had. That night, she soaked in her bathtub, soft music playing in the background, a candle flickering beside the tub. She thought of the girl who once folded her dreams small enough to fit inside a man's shadow. And then she thought of the woman she was now, designing, leading, loved, not for performance, but for presence. The email came in at 8:07 a.m. Subject, zoning approval. North Avenue block project status. Approved stamp. City of Atlanta, official. Araya stared at the screen. The small, official emblem in the top corner. The final green light. She didn't jump, didn't shout. She just smiled. Softly, fully. It was the kind of moment she didn't have to share to know it mattered. Still, she forwarded it to Orion with a single line. It's real now. By 10:30, she was standing in the center of the lot that would soon become the cornerstone of the project. The sun was out. The wind was steady. Workers moved behind orange cones and foundation markers. She wore her usual boots. Hair tied back. Clipboard in hand. Orion arrived 20 minutes later. This time, no bag of croissants. Just him, and a rare grin on his face. "You know what this means?" he asked. She looked up at the cleared lot behind them. "It means we start," he nodded. "Not just the build. The legacy." They reviewed plans, electrical layouts, fixture placements, emergency access paths. Araya caught a small error in the blueprint and quietly pointed it out. Orion looked over her shoulder, then stepped back with a low chuckle. "I don't know how people miss these things," he said. "They don't see what they're not trained to look for," she replied. He raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like a bigger metaphor." She smiled. Then silence returned, not heavy, not awkward, just real. After the site check, they walked 2 blocks down to a small bistro for lunch. Sat by the window. Shared roasted vegetables and grilled fish on soft bread. Halfway through, Orion set his fork down. "You ever think about the version of you before all this?" Araya paused. "The version Maddox met?" she asked. "No," he said. "The version before him." She sat with the question for a moment. "I think she's still here," she said. "Just less quiet. Less willing to bend." Orion nodded slowly. "She's the one I see," he said. "Not the woman Maddox ignored. Not the wife who waited in silence. The builder. The woman who didn't flinch anymore." Later that day, she walked back into her studio. Taryn greeted her with a raised brow. "You're glowing." Araya smiled. Zoning cleared. "That's not the glow I'm talking about." Araya didn't reply, but she didn't deny it either. That night, Araya curled up on her couch with her sketch pad. She didn't draw buildings. She drew people. A child reading in a community center. A woman dancing alone in a quiet park. A man standing still, waiting, not demanding, for someone to walk beside him. Then she drew a figure with her back turned slightly, hair swept up, arms unburdened, face turned to the light. She didn't know if it was her, but it felt like home. The soft launch was never meant to be grand. A small press release. A ribbon cutting for investors and community leaders. Just enough noise to show the city something new was coming, without revealing all the pieces yet. Araya stood near the center of the block, dressed in tailored slacks, a cream blouse, and a simple necklace. Her hair swept back. Her energy calm, rooted. People moved around her, shaking hands, holding clipboards, smiling, cameras flashing quietly. She greeted each person with measured grace. Confident. Present. Nothing forced. She wasn't hiding behind the project. She was at the center of it. And next to her, Orion, matching her pace. When the mayor's assistant asked for a few words, Orion stepped back. "This is Araya's moment," he said. She didn't decline, didn't freeze. She stepped up. She thanked the city, the team, the vendors, then said simply, "We didn't want to build something loud. We wanted to build something lasting, a place where people could walk in and feel like they were meant to belong." The crowd applauded. Orion watched her, not with pride, with partnership. 20 minutes later, while she reviewed a vendor board near the model unit, she felt it, a presence behind her. She turned. Maddox, uninvited. He wore a dark coat, sunglasses, casual enough to blend, expensive enough to stand out. He approached slowly, as if he could still occupy her space without asking. She didn't smile. He removed his glasses. "You're still hard to ignore," he said. She folded the vendor board and handed it to an assistant before turning back. "You shouldn't be here. I know," he said. "But I needed to see it. To see you." Araya didn't move. "I used to think you were playing small," he added. "That you were afraid to take up space." She raised an eyebrow. "And now?" "Now I know it wasn't fear. It was restraint. You were making room for everyone, even me." She didn't answer. He stepped closer. "I didn't understand what I had." She looked him in the eye. "And now?" His voice dropped. "I understand what I lost." She let that sit. Let it breathe. Then she said, "That's yours to carry. Not mine to hold." He didn't try again. Didn't beg. Didn't apologize. He turned, walked back through the crowd, vanished. And that was the last time she ever saw him that way. As the sun dipped lower, soft orange light brushed the buildings around them. Orion walked up beside her. "You good?" he asked. She nodded. "I meant what I said earlier," he added. "This is your moment." She looked at him, then toward the space they were building. "It's ours now," she said. He didn't speak. He just reached out, not for her hand, but to offer his open palm. She placed her fingers in his without hesitation. They didn't kiss, didn't pose. They just stood, quiet, side by side. Everything she used to chase now walked beside her. The next few weeks moved quietly. Permits turned into plans. Plans turned into framing. Framing turned into walls. The North Avenue block was finally becoming real. Araya spent her mornings at the studio and her afternoons on site. By evening, she'd return home with paint samples in her bag, construction, dust on her boots, and a calm in her chest she hadn't felt in years. Not excitement, not adrenaline. One evening, Orion invited her to a small dinner at a rooftop restaurant. Nothing loud, just wine, clean plates, and city lights flickering around them. They sat across from each other, no schedule, no pressure. Araya wore a long black sweater dress, hair in a soft twist. No makeup, no filter. Orion had on a navy jacket over a dark shirt, sleeves pushed up. Halfway through the meal, he set down his fork and said, "You've done more than design a block." She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "You changed how people feel in it, the way they stand, the way they speak when they walk inside your spaces." She didn't respond. He leaned forward slightly. "Your work holds people in ways they don't even realize they needed." The words landed gently. Not like praise, like truth. Araya looked down for a moment, then quietly asked, "Do you ever wonder if we're still healing in silence just because we're used to it?" Orion's voice was low, steady, all the time. She looked back at him. "But I'm not interested in surviving anymore," he added. "I want peace that breathes. I want someone who doesn't flinch when I'm soft." Araya didn't speak for a full 10 seconds. Then, "I want that too." No declarations, no grand scenes, just honesty, shared, returned. Later that night, Orion walked her to her door, not because she needed protection, but because he wanted her to know she wasn't walking alone. They paused at her doorway. He didn't lean in, didn't reach for her. He waited. She stepped closer, placed her hand gently against his chest. "I don't want temporary," she said. His hand covered hers. "You won't get that here." They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. The moment already said it. Inside, Araya stood by her window after he left. She looked out at the city she once felt invisible in. Now she was shaping it. And more importantly, she was finally ready to be loved again. Not because she was healed perfectly, but because someone was willing to love her through the parts that still needed warmth. The night air felt still. The block was quiet. Construction paused for the weekend. Araya stood near the model unit, keys in hand, looking up at the soft glow of lights that had recently been installed. She was alone, but not lonely. Orion arrived a few minutes later. No rush, no explanation, just presence. They sat inside, in the unfinished lounge space, with exposed beams and no furniture. Just 2 mugs of tea and the sound of wind tapping lightly against the glass. "You okay?" he asked gently. Araya looked out at the space. I think I'm ready. For what? To talk. Really talk. He didn't shift. Didn't lean in. He just waited. She spoke slowly. I used to think I wasn't enough. Not because someone told me that directly, but because I kept being treated like an afterthought. Araya nodded once, silent. I planned birthdays he didn't show up for. Made dinner he forgot to come home to. Watched him talk about our future like I was a piece of furniture in it. Her voice didn't crack. It held. I don't think he hated me, she continued. I think he just never saw me as a person with a soul. I was function. Pretty, polished, useful. She paused. I forgot how to speak without asking myself if I'd sound like a burden. Orian's voice came low and steady. You don't sound like one now. She looked at him. Tears didn't fall. But her eyes were full. I don't want to carry old wounds into something new. You're not. What if some days I go quiet again? I'll wait. What if I'm scared of trusting a future I didn't script? I'll build it with you, day by day. The silence after that wasn't heavy. It was whole. She stood, walked toward the middle of the open floor, and turned slowly. This is going to be something, she said. You already are, he replied. Later, as they walked out together, Orion opened the door for her. She stepped through. He didn't ask to come up, didn't push for more. He simply said, Text me when you're in. I will, she said, then added, Thank you. For letting me speak without asking me to bleed. He nodded once. Every piece of you is welcome, even the ones you're still learning to name. That night, Araya stood in her kitchen. No lights on, just the glow from the hallway, casting long shadows across the floor. She whispered to herself, He doesn't fix my voice. He reminds me I still have one. It was raining lightly by the time Araya stepped outside. The street glistened under amber lights. Puddles shimmered like quiet reminders of softness in motion. She didn't rush, didn't flinch at the cold. The water didn't bother her. She looked up once and smiled. Orion's car was parked across the street. She hadn't told him to come. She hadn't asked. But somehow, he was always there when it mattered. He stepped out when he saw her. No umbrella, just a hood pulled over his head, and a look in his eyes that said he was steady, no matter the weather. They stood under the awning of her building. No one else around. The city quieting for the night. You weren't expecting me, he said softly. I wasn't, she replied. But I'm not surprised. He nodded. You good? Yes, really. She paused. Then said, I'm not scared anymore. Not of Maddox, not of her silence, not of being seen. Orion didn't step closer. Araya did. There was no question in the space between them. No asking for permission. No reaching for something they weren't both ready to receive. She lifted her eyes to his. He looked back like he was standing still in a world that never did. Then, slowly, she leaned in. Their lips met, soft, full, unforced. It wasn't a beginning. It was a homecoming. He didn't deepen the kiss, didn't pull her tighter. He simply let it be what it was, a woman choosing, and a man staying still enough to receive it. When they pulled apart, her breath wasn't shaky. It was calm. He touched her cheek once with the back of his fingers. You sure? He asked. She nodded. This isn't reaction, she whispered. It's clarity. He smiled. Then I'll follow your pace. They didn't go upstairs, didn't push past the moment. He walked her to her door. She opened it, stepped inside. Before she closed it, she looked back at him one last time. He said nothing. She said everything with her eyes. Then the door shut gently behind her, and inside, for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. She felt chosen, without being asked to change. That night, she wrote in her journal. There was no music, no fire, just stillness. And in that stillness, someone waited for me to step forward. And when I did, he didn't move. Because I was already enough. The city moved faster in the new year. People returned to work. Streetlights buzzed longer. Deadlines picked up speed. But for Araya, the rhythm was different now. Not slower, more honest. She woke early, made tea, lit a candle on her desk. She still checked emails, took calls, walked job sites, but something inside her had shifted. She no longer measured her day by how much she finished. She measured it by how it felt. Orion started coming by more often. Not every night, not every morning, just often, sometimes with food, sometimes with nothing but quiet. He didn't announce himself with flowers, didn't overwhelm her with plans. He simply showed up, held space, shared thoughts, listened. One evening, they sat on her living room floor, eating takeout from paper boxes. She wore a faded tee and socks. He leaned back against the couch, legs stretched out, plate balanced on one knee. "You ever think this would be your life?" he asked. "No," she said honestly. "I used to think comfort had to be bought. And now," she smiled, "now I know peace looks like sitting on the floor, eating noodles with someone who doesn't ask me to perform." He nodded. "Good. Because I'm terrible at fancy." She laughed, deep and soft, then leaned her head on his shoulder. At the project site, the first phase of framing was complete. Araya walked the space with a clipboard and pencil. Taryn beside her, 2 contractors trailing behind. Everything was on schedule, but more than that, everything felt aligned. She placed a sticky note on a pillar. "Add bench seating here. Natural light will hit around 3 p.m. She paused after writing it. That small detail mattered to her, because someone would sit there one day, not knowing it was designed to hold them. That was how she loved now, in unseen ways. Quiet ones, strong ones. That weekend, Orion invited her to a house showing. She tilted her head when he asked, "You moving?" She said, "I'm considering a shift," he said, "but I want your eyes on it." She didn't ask what that meant. She went. The house was modest but warm. 2 bedrooms, soft wood floors, a kitchen with real light. He walked her through the space, not as a pitch, but as a vision. "There's space here," he said, "for the life I want. One that doesn't move too fast, doesn't ask too much." She ran her fingers along the edge of the kitchen counter. "I can see that." He looked at her. "I can see you in it." They didn't define anything. They didn't rush, but that night, when she slipped her hand into his as they walked back to the car, he gripped it gently, not as a claim, as a promise. At home, she stood at her mirror brushing her hair. Her reflection wasn't trying to be anything, not perfect, not polished, just her. She thought of Maddox, of the silence, the dismissal, the way she once waited to be asked. Now she was being welcomed, and she knew. Sometimes love doesn't knock. Sometimes it waits just far enough away, hoping you'll choose to walk toward it. And when you do, it stays. 3 weeks after the new year, Orion knocked once before stepping in. He had keys now. She had offered them quietly. He'd taken them respectfully. He never used them without asking. But today, she'd texted him, "Come whenever." The house is calm. He entered to find her in the kitchen, sleeves pushed up, making something warm. "Smells like cinnamon," he said. She smiled. "It is. Orange peel, too." He walked up behind her, placed a kiss on her shoulder. Nothing rushed, nothing heavy. "You okay?" She nodded. "I think I'm still learning what okay feels like." They sat by the window, bowls in hand. Outside, traffic moved. Dogs barked in the distance. A breeze tapped the glass. Inside, it was still, safe. Later that day, while Araya worked on a room layout, Orion stood in her hallway, studying the wall of framed sketches she'd never shown anyone before. He turned when she walked in. "These are yours?" She nodded. "My early designs. From before Maddox, before college, even." He pointed at one. "This one. You should build it." She blinked. "That? It's not perfect. It's real. That makes it perfect." She didn't speak. She didn't have to. He walked over, pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. "Don't shrink. She whispered, "I'm not. Not anymore." They didn't celebrate Valentine's Day. They didn't have to. On February 15th, he brought her 3 tulips, not roses, not wrapped in plastic, just 3 with a small note. "Because this, us, is growing gently." She tucked them into a glass on the counter and smiled at him like she'd never been smiled at before. In March, Araya landed her biggest private client yet, an award-winning restaurateur looking to build a boutique hotel in Midtown. She called Orion after the meeting. "You busy?" she asked. "I'm never too busy to hear your wins." Her voice softened. "Then listen close." And when she told him, his joy wasn't loud, it was layered in pride. "You've earned every door that opens," he said. That night, he showed up with candles, not for romance, but to help her map the mood board for her new project. He lit them, then sat beside her, pointing at swatches. This was what love looked like now. Support, presence, ease. Spring brought warmth to the city. Windows opened. Markets filled. Music floated through open streets. One Sunday, they walked through Piedmont Park, holding iced coffees, laughing at nothing. A child ran past, trailing bubbles. Araya paused to watch. She didn't say it aloud, but in her heart, a quiet wish took shape. Not for noise, not for chaos, but maybe a small future. A soft home. A family, if it ever came. Orion glanced sideways, as if he felt it too. He didn't speak. He just took her hand and kept walking. They didn't rush forever. They simply stayed for now. And that was more than enough. They said she'd break by Christmas, but she chose something else. Peace, dignity, a new beginning. And tonight, maybe you're thinking about your own quiet heartbreak. Maybe someone walked away without looking back. Maybe you're still learning how to breathe again. If Araya's journey reminded you of your strength, if Orion's love reminded you that real men don't control, they protect, then this is your story too. Drop a heart in the comments if you've ever had to walk away from someone who didn't see your worth. Tell us, have you ever let go of someone you loved because you finally loved yourself more? We want to hear your story. Tap like if Araya inspired you. Tap share if someone you know needs to hear this. And hit subscribe to stay with us, because tomorrow we tell another story that might just heal a part of you. This is Mr. Charles Stories, where love breaks, love rebuilds, and you never have to walk this journey alone.